Most parents don't damage their child by doing something wrong. They do it by chasing perfection at the exact moment their child needs safety instead.
What truly shapes the next 20 years of your child's emotional life happens quietly before age 3, and almost no one tells you this part.
I want to start with something uncomfortable. Most parents don't ruin their children by being careless. They ruin themselves by trying too hard. There's a quiet panic that creeps in during the early years, and it doesn't look like chaos. It looks like effort. Late nights reading parenting advice, second guessing every decision, that constant feeling that if you miss the right step now, you'll spend years paying for it later. I remember feeling that weight myself. Sitting there, phone in hand, scrolling through experts, routines, milestones, warnings, everyone seemed certain. Everyone had a system. And somehow, the more I learned, the more anxious I became. Not because I didn't care enough, but because I cared too much.
What no one tells you is this: the pressure doesn't come from your child, it comes from the story we've been sold about parenting.
That these first 3 years are a narrow window where every mistake leaves a permanent mark. That perfection isn't optional, it's the price of love. And once that idea takes hold, everything becomes heavy. A skipped routine feels like a failure. A tantrum feels like a warning sign. A moment of exhaustion feels like proof you're falling behind. At some point, I realized I wasn't asking the right question anymore. I wasn't asking what my child needed. I was asking what I was doing wrong. That's when something shifted.
I stopped chasing answers designed to impress other adults and started listening to what actually mattered in real life.
Not what looks good, not what sounds responsible, but what truly shapes a child beneath the surface, long before anyone is watching. Because if we're honest, the greatest risk in these early years isn't that we'll do too little. It's that we'll worry so much about doing it perfectly, we'll miss what actually matters. And once that question changed, everything else had to slow down with it. I didn't go looking for reassurance. I went looking for something steadier than opinions. Something that could cut through the noise without replacing it with another set of impossible rules. What I found, quietly and repeatedly, was that the science wasn't nearly as complicated as the culture around parenting had made it feel. Across years of research from places like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and pediatric institutions that don't benefit from trends or fear, the focus keeps returning to the same place. Not achievement, not acceleration, but the nervous system. In the first 3 years, a child's brain is not being trained for performance. It's being wired for safety. The emotional centers develop early and fast, long before the parts responsible for logic, impulse control, or self-regulation. That imbalance isn't a flaw. It's design. A young child is built to feel deeply before they can manage those feelings on their own. This reframes so much of what we struggle with as parents. The meltdowns, the sudden shifts, the reactions that seem outsized and irrational. They aren't signals of bad behavior. They're signs of an overwhelmed system asking for support it cannot yet provide for itself. What surprised me most was how little this research asks of parents in terms of complexity and how much it asks in terms of presence. Study after study points to the same mechanism. Children learn to regulate their emotions through repeated experiences of being regulated with. They borrow calm before they can create it. They internalize safety before they can offer it to themselves. That means your tone matters more than your explanation. Your steadiness matters more than your strategy. A calm adult doesn't just solve the moment. They shape the architecture of how stress is handled years down the line. This isn't about doing more. It's about understanding what your child's brain is actually built to need, and letting that truth replace the pressure to perform. Once I understood that the nervous system was the starting point, the rest of the picture began to reorganize itself. What stood out wasn't a list of techniques, but a few quiet foundations that kept showing up beneath everything else. They don't announce themselves loudly, and they rarely get celebrated online, but they shape a child far more deeply than most of what we obsess over. The first foundation is emotional connection, not performance. Children aren't measuring us by how efficient the day runs or how closely we follow a plan. They're measuring something much simpler and much more human, whether they feel emotionally held. Connection is built in small, ordinary moments. When you pause instead of rushing, when you respond instead of dismissing, when your child senses that their inner world matters, even when it's messy. This isn't about constant attention or endless stimulation. It's about emotional availability. Over time, that availability becomes trust, and trust quietly turns into confidence. A child who feels secure doesn't cling forever. They explore because they know where safety lives. The second foundation is regulation before self-control. We often expect young children to manage emotions they don't yet have the capacity to understand. When a child falls apart over something that seems small, it's tempting to correct, explain, or fix. But what they need first isn't logic. It's a regulated adult nervous system nearby. Calm is learned through proximity. When you stay steady, your child's body slowly learns what steady feels like. That lesson doesn't come from words, it comes from repetition. Over time, those experiences shape how stress is handled, not just in childhood, but much later in life. The third foundation is allowing development to unfold without constant pressure. Play, boredom, and unstructured time aren't gaps to be filled. They're spaces where integration happens. When children play freely, they practice problem solving and emotional processing in ways no lesson can replicate. When they're bored, imagination steps in. Even the conversations around screen time become clearer when viewed through this lens. The real question isn't whether screens exist, but whether they replace connection or coexist with it. Comparison quietly undermines all of this. Every child develops on a timeline shaped by biology, temperament, and environment. When we constantly measure progress against others, we introduce anxiety where there doesn't need to be any. These foundations don't demand perfection. They ask for awareness. And once you see them clearly, it becomes easier to let go of the pressure to do more and instead focus on what truly leaves a mark. And once you stop confusing pressure with progress, another truth comes into focus just as clearly. Emotional safety doesn't grow in the absence of boundaries. It grows because of them. Children don't feel secure when anything goes. They feel secure when the world responds in ways that are calm, consistent, and predictable. Boundaries aren't there to control a child. They're there to orient them. They quietly answer the question every young nervous system is asking. What happens next? And will I be okay? This is where many well-intentioned parents get tangled. We explain too much, negotiate too early, and exhaust ourselves trying to reason with a brain that isn't built for reasoning yet. But clarity is often kinder than complexity. A simple, steady no delivered without anger or guilt can be grounding. It tells a child that the adult in the room is stable enough to hold the line. Respect develops the same way. Not through lectures, but through patterns. When hitting, yelling, or dismissive behavior is met with calm interruption instead of laughter or avoidance, a child learns something essential. Emotions are allowed. Certain behaviors are not. That distinction matters. It teaches children that feelings don't make them unsafe, but actions still have boundaries. What's easy to miss is that boundaries don't weaken connection, they protect it. When limits are clear, children don't have to test endlessly to find where safety begins. They can relax into the relationship instead of pushing against it. Warmth without structure creates uncertainty. Structure without warmth creates fear. But when both are present, something steadier forms. The child learns not just how to behave, but how relationships work. And that lesson, repeated quietly in everyday moments, becomes part of how they move through the world long after these early years have passed. And when boundaries begin to feel steady rather than heavy, the final shift becomes possible. At some point, you realize that parenting was never meant to be a performance measured from the outside. It's a relationship built from the inside out. The more you let go of chasing approval, the more space there is to actually notice your child. Not the version you think they should be, but the one standing in front of you. There will always be advice, new studies, new methods, new voices claiming certainty. Some of it will be helpful. Much of it will quietly pull you away from your own instincts. But no one else lives inside your days the way you do. No one else feels the rhythm of your child's moods, needs, and sensitivities as closely. Trusting yourself doesn't mean ignoring knowledge. It means letting understanding inform your intuition instead of replacing it. When something creates constant tension rather than connection, it's worth pausing. When a strategy works on paper but doesn't work in your home, that matters. In the end, children don't carry forward our plans. They carry forward how it felt to be with us. The steadiness, the safety, the sense that someone was paying attention. Perfection doesn't build that. Presence does. And when you begin to see that clearly, the pressure softens, and what remains is something far more sustainable than fear: trust. When you step back and look at all of this together, a quieter truth begins to emerge. The early years are not a test you pass or fail. They are a foundation you lay, often without realizing it, through thousands of ordinary moments. The way you respond when your child is overwhelmed, the way you hold boundaries without fear, the way you choose presence over performance, even when no one is watching. These are the things that shape how a child learns to feel safe in their own mind and body. The deeper lesson here is simple, but not easy. Your role is not to perfect your child, but to provide a steady, emotional environment where growth can happen naturally. In daily life, that means slowing down your reactions, prioritizing connection before correction, and noticing when pressure is coming from outside voices rather than real needs inside your home. It means allowing yourself to be human, knowing that consistency matters far more than flawlessness. If this resonates with you, I'd love to hear your perspective. Which part of this message felt most relevant to where you are right now? Please share your thoughts in the comments so others can learn from your experience as well. And if you found this helpful, consider subscribing to the channel. Your support makes it possible to keep creating thoughtful content like this going forward.